The small metal numbers hammered into old telephone poles that no one can explain. Next time you're driving down an old country road, take a closer look at the wooden telephone poles you pass along the way. If you look carefully, right around eye level, you might notice something strange. A small metal disc, hammered directly into the wood, stamped with a single number. Not a phone number. Not an address. Just one small number, driven into the pole with a nail, decades ago, for a reason almost nobody today can explain. Those little metal discs are called date nails, and they were never meant to be noticed by the public at all. They were a secret code, used quietly by an entire industry, hidden in plain sight on poles that millions of people walk and drive past every single day without ever looking twice. Here's what they actually meant. Back when telephone and utility companies first began installing wooden poles across the country, engineers faced a serious problem. Wood rots. Some poles lasted decades. Others failed within just a few years, depending on the type of wood, the weather, and the treatment used to preserve it. Companies needed a way to track exactly how old each individual pole was, without relying on paper records that could easily get lost, damaged, or simply misplaced over time. So they came up with a remarkably simple solution. Every single pole installed in a given year received a small metal nail stamped with that specific year, hammered directly into the wood at roughly eye level. A pole installed in 1932 got a nail stamped with those exact numbers. A pole installed the following year got a completely different nail. Workers walking the line years later could glance at any single pole, check the small metal disc, and instantly know its exact age without consulting a single document. This simple system quietly solved a massive logistical problem. Crews could prioritize replacing the oldest poles first. Engineers could track which types of wood treatment lasted longest simply by comparing failure rates against the dates stamped on surviving poles. An entire company's infrastructure could be managed and maintained using nothing more than small metal discs, hammered into wood, decades before computers or centralized databases ever existed. For decades, workers climbing these poles saw these small nails constantly, so routinely that nobody thought to explain them to anyone outside the industry. They simply became part of the job, an internal shorthand understood only by the people who needed to understand it. The public walked past them constantly, completely unaware that each pole was quietly announcing its exact birth year to anyone who knew where to look. Different companies used different styles of nails. Some used simple round discs. Others used specific shapes or colors to indicate not just the year, but sometimes even the type of wood treatment used, creating an entire hidden language embedded directly into utility poles across the country. Collectors who study these nails today can often identify which specific company installed a pole simply by examining the nail's shape and design. As decades passed, this practice slowly changed. Newer poles began arriving pre-treated with more advanced methods, requiring less individual tracking. Digital record-keeping eventually replaced the need for physical date nails entirely. Companies gradually stopped installing them, and the practice quietly faded into obscurity, much like the wooden poles themselves as some regions transitioned toward buried utility lines. But thousands of these old poles are still standing today, particularly along rural roads and older neighborhoods, each one still carrying its small metal disc, silently displaying a year that most passers-by will never notice or understand. Some of these poles have survived storms, decades of harsh weather, and generations of changing technology, all while quietly wearing a small metal tag revealing exactly when they first went into the ground. Today, a small but dedicated community of collectors actively searches for these date nails, sometimes salvaging them from poles being replaced or removed. Certain years or unusual shapes have become surprisingly valuable among collectors, transforming a once purely functional industrial marker into something closer to a small piece of hidden history. Most people driving past these poles every single day have absolutely no idea what that small metal disc actually represents. They assume it's simply a random piece of hardware, if they notice it at all. Few realize they're looking at a quiet historical record, hammered directly into wood, patiently surviving decades of weather and change. If you ever find yourself walking or driving past an old wooden utility pole, take a moment to look closely around eye level. You might just find one of these small metal discs, quietly revealing an exact year from possibly a century ago, hidden in plain sight this entire time, waiting for someone curious enough to finally notice it. It's easy to overlook small details like this, scattered quietly across an entire country's infrastructure. But each one represents a clever, simple solution to a real problem, solved decades before modern technology existed, hammered directly into wood, and left standing quietly along roadsides for anyone patient enough to actually look.